this week, the rescissions package is set to hit the Senate floor. And as I mentioned, it passed by, if it's to be passed by the deadline, it has to pass by Friday. Now, this package claws back billions of dollars in federal funding that have been going to public broadcasting, foreign aid, and various woke priorities, some of them in PEPFAR, as we talked about last week. But will Senate Republicans be able to overcome opposition within their own ranks? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Suzanne Bowdey, editorial director and senior writer at the Washington Stand, and Casey Harper, managing editor for the broadcast at the Washington Stand. Suzanne, Casey, thanks for joining me today on Washington Watch.
Thanks Tony.
All right, let me start with you, Suzanne, because, we've been hearing a lot from celebrities, pop stars, and even Christian influencers about PEPFAR, the president's emergency plan for AIDS relief. Give us an update on the status and what's at stake this week.
Well, what's at stake is $9.4 billion in savings, as you outlined just then. And a lot of those savings are coming from aspects of this program that are absolutely woke and unnecessary. And what we're hearing, surprisingly, even from conservatives, or Republicans, I should say, not conservatives, and some members of the church, is that this is really threatening life-saving care in Africa, which is absolutely not true. In fact, on the contrary, what it's threatening are the woke programs. A tiny sliver of PEPFAR is what's included in this rescissions package, about $400 million, which is only about 5% of the program. And these are aspects of PEPFAR that the African countries themselves have objected to over time. Very pro-abortion, pro-LGBT cultural imperialism that the Biden administration instructed PEPFAR to start including when he was in office. This is just clawing back that and respecting the African nations who say, look, we come from a value system that supports life, that supports natural family. We appreciate all of your life-saving care, your health treatments, the education you've done in our countries, but we'd really like to stick to the mission at hand. And unfortunately, we're seeing some people like Senator Susan Collins from Maine who are saying this is terminating the entire program. Absolutely not true. Nothing in the rescissions package would terminate PEPFAR. This is a haircut, as you've said in prior episodes, and not at all threatening the program at large. It will continue. And unfortunately, for the country that puts no stock in in the media's credibility, they seem to be taking the headlines seriously that this is going to really impact PEPFAR's mission, and it's not. It's actually going to return PEPFAR to the mission at hand.
All right, folks, we've got more on this on PEPFAR, but let me go ahead and give you this. PEPFAR, text PEPFAR, PEPFAR, PEPFAR to 67742, because you need to weigh in on this like right now, because the Senate's going to be taking this up and amending it. Now, I want to unpack a little bit more about what Suzanne had to say, because, Suzanne, I dug into this last week pretty deep, because this goes back to 2003 when I actually came to the Family Research Council. So this is one of the benefits of longevity, is that you can remember these things. Well, most of the time you can remember the things that happened. But this was initially introduced with an annual allocation of $1.5 billion a year. And this was to address an emergency mainly in the Caribbean and the African continent dealing with AIDS. Well, it has ballooned to where the allocation last year was $7.1 billion for the year. So it's grown tremendously, but along the way, it's lost its mission focus, and now it's promoting abortion, LGBTQ priorities. And as you mentioned, this is just $400 million out of $7.1 billion. It's not even 6%. And
no,
I mean, how
crazy.
The Senate Republicans, not the Democrats, the Republicans are opposed to just dialing last year's allocation back less than 6%. This is crazy. And I applaud the Trump administration and Russ Vought over at the Office of Budget Management that is actually driving this. This is, as you said, a small baby step in getting this program back to where it where it originally started. I would add one caveat to this, Suzanne, and then I'm going to go to Casey, that the original plan, it was called an emergency, It was designed to hand this off at some point to those nations where they, through training and helping equip them, could take this over. We need to get out of this business. We need to help, and we need to leave.
And we need to stop listening to people like Bono who are spreading lies and start listening to the African people.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that?
As a former U2 fan, former, emphasis on the former, yes, we need to stop listening to these people spreading lies and actually be intellectually curious enough to look at the bill, look at the language, and look at what Trump is trying to do. We need to be listening to the African people. You know, in 2023, when Biden started making these radical changes, 133 leaders from Africa, mainly religious leaders, wrote to Congress and said, hey, look, you guys need to back off from this woke stuff and get back to helping our people. They don't want it. No, they don't want it. Yeah, 15 countries were on that letter. And who are we listening to? We're listening to people like Russell Moore and Bono and Susan Collins, who obviously haven't read what the president is trying to do. Well,
first off, people need to read the bill. They need to look at the track record of PEPFAR. And we actually have documents on that. We tracked it. It really, really got off track during the Obama years and then the Biden years. But I'll also add another Christian celebrity who has been out there. I guess she's still considered in that genre. Amy Grant. Actually, one of the first concerts I ever went to as a kid in high school. But that beside the point, she's out there. Many of these Christians are saying, oh, this is the compassionate thing to do. No, it's not. To fund abortion, to keep a program that is $7 billion a year that promotes most values that are antithetical to biblical teaching, that's not Christian. That's not compassionate. Okay. I got to get off my soapbox. Let's move on. Casey. All right. A Democrat super PAC, United the Country, Unite the Country is the name of the super PAC, released new polling. Tell us about this.
Sure. I mean, this is a mammoth poll. If you're working in Democratic politics, you've got to be talking about this poll today. A couple things about it. One, as you mentioned, it's a Democrat poll. And it's pretty critical of Democrats. And so this is not, as we get into it, this is not like a far-right poll or some GOP poll that's saying negative things about Democrats. It's coming from their own mouth. So that's an important thing to note. Secondly, this is polling people in battleground states, 10 battleground states, 21 battleground counties. And so these are the coveted swing state voters. We talk about them ad nauseum every election year. And so here's the question. What did they say when Democrats asked them? Well, they didn't say nice things about Democrats, it turns out, even though Democrats were asking them. So, for instance, with white men and Hispanic men, and really just working class voters, their approval rating has dropped down to below 35%, which is a number, it's really hard to come back from that number, Tony. And so below 35%, but I'm not sure there's any wonder. I mean, you just had some lawmakers on talking about it, but the Democrats just voted against no tax on tips. They voted against no tax on overtime. You know, I used to work as on a survey crew and with, construction guys, and overtime is a very serious deal. You cannot touch someone's overtime, and getting a lot of overtime is like getting a refund. So I think there's a little bit of out of touch with the working class there.
Well, the good news for Democrats, though, with a approval rating that low, they can pick up the profession of used car salesman and actually make an improvement. Not to offend any of our used car salesmen who are listening, but
you're not getting overtime if you're a used car salesman.
Well, that's true. No, that's true. So let's unpack this a little bit more. But is the Democratic Party on the verge of imploding? Because you're seeing now these Marxists, like we have in New York, Mandani, and then we have these a lot of young people who are saying, you know what, I'm not waiting for these gray hairs to get out of the way. We're taking them out, and they're coming with a very, I wouldn't even use the term progressive. I mean, it is Marxist, socialist. Can the Democratic Party survive this?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're asking the same question right now. You've seen a few things happen over the recent months. In the November election, or really, when Trump's first win was earth-shattering for the Democratic Party, it caused a lot of introspection, a lot of reflection. How could this happen? They did a lot of talking. They put Biden forth because they thought he was kind of a working-class guy, and it sort of worked for a little while. But that was just a stopgap measure because the Democratic Party has deep, like subterranean problems, and it's twofold. One, they've built the party now on identity politics, and they built it on far left economic policies. And the identity politics half of the party was totally rebuked and just pushed back and voted down by Americans in November. You know, Kamala Harris, in a lot of ways, was a diversity DEI pick. Biden said as much, and she was rebuffed. And, you know, people like Joy Reid, who were spewing a lot of racism on TV every night, they lost their show. And so now the party is a little bit aimless. They have an identity crisis. And so they're reaching out for the other half of the party, which is far left, sort of Marxist economic policy. But it's very aggressive. It's Mamdani, it's AOC, it's Bernie Sanders. It resonates with young people, but the average American is just not ready to go that far, and for good reason. And so I think this is a good opportunity for Republicans to restate their identity.
Well, but I think it requires them to be anchored to transcendent truth and unchanging priorities. And that requires a party platform, which is where I think the Republicans went wrong in the last Republican convention. Suzanne, I think we've seen this on full display even within the Democratic Party structure. David Hogg being ousted, he for wanting to go after in primary Democrats that he didn't think was progressive enough.
And I think the Democrats have spent a lot of money on autopsies and strategy meetings and focus groups to find out why they lost in 2024, and they're ignoring all of them, which say you're woke, you're weak, you're out of touch. And instead, that what we see is that they're just, as Casey said, aimless. And really at this point, I mean, this isn't about finding better messaging, crafting better messaging, finding better activism. They really need to find out what their policy goals are. Right now, there's no agreement on which direction the party should go. And that means there's an opportunity for Republicans to create a clear contrast by emphasizing those things that Americans care about, the common sense things about, you know, life and human dignity and marriage and not having boys and girls sports. This is an opportunity for Republicans as much as it is a criticism of Democrats. But in the short term, Democrats can run on the Trump derangement syndrome. That's going to be really helpful for them. They have Trump for another few years, but after that, the party's really going to have to grapple with where do we go from here if we don't have Trump to beat around anymore. Right now, the party is about 35% optimistic about their future, down from 57 last year. That's a huge drop in confidence in the party, and a lot of it is because they have no direction. And once Trump is out of the way, I really don't know what they do if they don't come back and sort of have a reckoning within their party to move to the middle.
Casey, you just have about a minute left. What's the risk for Republicans during this time as Democrats are trying to find themselves?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes Republicans get in a political bubble, and so when Democrats move far to the left, you know, they know these Democrats, and they say, oh, there's a new center, and so the center moves to the left, and so they feel a temptation to move to the left themselves, but they're actually doing sort of the opposite of what they should do. When people like Mamdani question things as fundamental as, you know, taxing based on race or property rights, this is this time to make the case as a Republican Party for who it is that they are, you know, property rights, rejecting woke politics, you know, traditional values, that kind of thing. And if they do that, I think they could be successful.
All right, Casey Harper, Suzanne Bowdey, thanks so much for joining us today.